Good evening and welcome to The Drum tonight. I'm John Barron. With me on the panel, Tom Switzer from the United States Studies Centre, author and social commentator Jane Caro, and in Canberra tonight, ABC Online chief political writer Annabel Crabb. First this evening to the devastating news from New Zealand's Pike River mine. There is now no hope of survival for the 29 men missing after a second blast today, far bigger than the first explosion last Friday. It's been confirmed 2 Australians are among those dead. It's the news that the families and the colleagues of the miners had been dreading, the Mayor today describing it as the district's darkest hour. Our Prime Minister Julia Gillard has expressed her condolences to the people of New Zealand.
The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Prime Minister Key, has just confirmed that there is now no hope that the 29 miners trapped underground at Pike River will be brought out alive. This is tragic news. 29 families have been hoping, praying, waiting to hear good news, and now they've heard the most terrible news. Our hearts go out to them, and on behalf of the Australian people, I give the condolences of this nation. Of course, 2 of these families are Australian, the family of William Joinson and Josh Ufer. To those families, we especially say we want you to have our condolences. We want you to understand that the nation is grieving with you at this dreadful and difficult time. This is obviously a community in New Zealand that will now grieve bearing this dreadful loss. We send our best wishes, and our best wishes, sympathy and support go to the 2 Australian families now living with this dreadful and tragic news.
The Prime Minister just a little earlier this afternoon. The Pike River mine disaster, as it will now forever be known, is not just a terrible trauma for the families of the victims and the people of Greymouth in New Zealand. Experts today are saying that it could have a major psychological impact on other people who've experienced disasters, from this year's Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand, even Victoria's Black Saturday bushfires and more. Before his retirement from the Salvation Army, Don Woodland was one of Australia's top trauma managers, from the battlefields of Vietnam to the aftermath of the Port Arthur massacre in the 1990s. Don Woodland joins us tonight from Brisbane. Don, thanks very much for your time. First, can we get your thoughts on what the people at the epicentre of this disaster in Greymouth, New Zealand must be feeling? The families, the friends, the people. We're getting reports of angry scenes and natural despair. How are they going to be feeling now, and how do you manage those feelings?
Well, I think it's an individual problem, but not when I say problem, it is an individual response to what has almost inevitably been the outcome for some days. When one considers what occurred initially, there were those who are holding on to hope, but now that hope has diminished with this second explosion today, and reality now comes that their loved ones, whoever it might be, will not be coming home again. The anger that's there, I can understand that in a way for some days now. There's been so much hope that has been portrayed, and I guess we've got to hold on to hope. But today that hope was taken away, so now they're in the pit of despair. The anger that is being evidenced is quite natural, because when something like this happens in a person's life, we've got to look for somebody to blame, and so the blame game is utmost at the moment.
That 5 days of hope and fear, and now they know the worst. Is that cruel, that hope that they were holding out? Does it soften the blow when it comes to prepare themselves? What is the typical pattern? How do people respond?
Well, I think in this particular situation, people were looking at the word hope, and watching the interviews of some people there, the hope was utmost, and they were hanging on to that. I could gather that there wasn't even the consideration that perhaps their loved ones wouldn't be coming home, but today that has been crushed, and now they're looking at, as the dust of reality settles on what's happened, we now have to get down into very low gear, as it were, and almost deal with this problem moment by moment.
You, Don, have spoken to somebody who has literally just seen a family member blown away in front of their eyes. You also know what it's like to have these disasters that unfold more gradually. What can you say to somebody in a situation such as this? Do you say, I feel your pain, or do you say, there's no way I can feel your pain?
Oh, whatever happens, you do not say, I understand what you're going through, because that is one of the most cruelest statements that you can make to a person. I could not even empathise. I can empathise with the person. I might even be able to appreciate just a little, but understand never, because everyone is an individual, and we're standing a long way back making comments about the events of the day, but to the person who's in the mix of it, it is a moment-by-moment thing. We're back into the shock zone, the physical of it all, and because while there was hope there, we were hanging on, but then the shock factors now come, and we go through all the physical shock symptoms, and I guess that's where people are this afternoon.
Finally, Don, can you explain to us how those shock waves have that rippling effect to people who've experienced similar disasters, tragedies in their own lives, and how this can bring a lot of traumatic experiences and memories back to the surface once again?
Oh, that is so true, so very true. People, anyone who has lost a loved one through a tragedy, be it a mine, be it a motor vehicle accident, be it a massacre, whatever it is, the events of today, although they are watching on television the events that are happening in the South Island of New Zealand, as they're sitting there listening, they will be reliving their own personal experience, and that is quite normal. People must realise that this is a normal response. Nothing is going wrong with their coping system or their memory or anything else. This is quite a normal response to the horrendous situation that has occurred.
Don Woodland, thanks for your insights and for the work that you do. Appreciate your time tonight. I'll turn it over to you, panel. Thanks, Don. Tom Switzer, first to you. The question now confronting the people in Greymouth, the mine officials and so on, is firstly, can we recover the bodies? And secondly, what do we do about this mine, a lifeblood for the community? Do we reopen it and save the jobs of hundreds of people? How do you answer a question like that?
Well, I don't know enough about the local circumstances, but it's clear that, you know, hearts and minds just go all out to the people in Greymouth. I suspect they probably will. There is a case for rebuilding it in honour of the people who have died. It is, like a lot of mining towns around the world, it's a great source of income and jobs, and it does bring communities together. Whether they can recover the bodies, I don't know. But look, this is just all a terrible reminder of the perils of the mining industry and the profession generally. And I think we've been spoilt a bit in the last 4 years. I mean, Beaconsville in Tasmania, Chile just recently, they were miracles. They are very rare, and that reality has been brought home in Greymouth today. It certainly has. Jane, Caro, in a situation such as this, how do you go about making those sorts of decisions, whether a mine should reopen? It's a little bit like, do you rebuild after the bushfire went through Marysville?
One day at a time, I'd be saying. I wouldn't be making any of those kinds of pronouncements now. This is traumatic, particularly for the people of that town and for the families. And I think that the task of everyone in a position now of authority or anything else is in fact not to do a whole lot of talking, not to do a whole lot of saying stuff, to do a whole lot of listening to the people who are traumatised and some who may need to just spill that story out over and over, whatever it is they need to do. Any kind of pronouncements about the future now, I think, would be insensitive and premature. The thing to be talking about now is people need to go through a process of accepting what has occurred and slowly coming to terms with where to from here. Right now, it's not a future moment, it's a present moment. And it's a terrible present and it's a hard present, but it can't be avoided and it can't be denied. It needs to be faced.
Annabel Crabb in Canberra, your thoughts on this today?
Well, I think I agree with Tom that it's a fairly brutal reminder of the nature of the industry, and you know, in Australia, obviously, we have an incredibly flourishing mining sector, and salaries in the mining sector are higher than they've ever been, and yet there's still this incredible danger that's involved. And, you know, there's something so graphic and so dreadful about the prospect of waiting less than a kilometre away from people who are trapped with no ability, despite all of the technology we have at our disposal now, to find out whether they're living or dead, or no ability to get to them. And there's something awfully agonising about that. And I must say that on the question of the use of that mine and the future of that mine, I'm with Jane Caro. I think that those families have got a long way to go before they can reconcile themselves to the truth of what's happened today, let alone what happens tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's update you now on the other major international story. It was breaking at this time yesterday. Tensions on the Korean Peninsula remain high this evening after North Korea yesterday bombarded a South Korean island, killing 2 Marines, South Korean Marines, and injuring several others. Countries around the world, including the United States, have been urging restraint be exercised. President Barack Obama said that his country will stand by their ally South Korea in the event of any future attack. He has agreed to hold joint military exercises with Seoul as well as a first response to this provocation. The Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd has pointed to China's key role in potentially diffusing these latest tensions.
But my simple message is this to our friends in Beijing, is that the world now needs China to bring more influence to bear on North Korea. And we, as friends and partners and allies of the United States, and both Japan and the Republic of Korea have formal alliance relationships with America, as do we, are watching these events very, very closely.
Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd earlier today. Tom Switzer, to you first on this. What do you make of this incident, and specifically, given your expertise, what the response of the United States should be from here?
Well, Kim Jong-il is literally on his deathbed, and he has passed the torch, so to speak, to his son. So this could be a way for his son to flex his muscles to show that he's burnishing his leadership credentials. It's a hell of a way of burnishing your leadership credentials, but we are talking about North Korea after all. In terms of what should be done, well, look, it's very difficult. A toughly approach doesn't seem to work, but neither does a softly approach. I think the six-party process should still keep going, but one thing I would say is that however unhinged the North Korean leadership is, I think that containment and deterrence can still work against a rogue state. Some advocates in America believe in